Okay, so now let's learn uh, default variables, default arguments to a function. Sometimes what happens that we want to call a function, and for some parameters or arguments, we want to go with default values. We don't want to supply the values. We don't want to pass the values for those arguments. We want to go with default values, some default values. And sometimes we want to go with some values to those arguments, right? So how can we do that, right? So let's write a demo function here, which returns nothing. So we have void, and we have, let's say the name of function is example A, and it takes three parameters. Let's say int A, int B equal 5, and then let's say double C equal 2.5. So here you see that the parameters that we are passing to this function example A. So how many parameters? We have three parameters. One is integer type, int A. Then second is integer type, int B. Third is double type, and then parameter's name is C. And here you see, you notice that we have int B, and after that we have equal 5. And with C, we have 2.5, right? So what do they mean basically? So here when we put B equal 5, so what does it mean basically? The default value of B will be 5. If the user does not supply the value of B, it will go with 5. And same thing, if the user does not supply the value of C, it will go with 2.5, right? So here for demonstration purpose, let's display the value of A, B, and C. Okay, so we are just displaying the value of A, B, and C here. And let's call this function from here. Okay. Let's call this function from here. And let's say we have three variable, int A, B, and C. And let's say A is equal to 5. And now I'm calling example A with A only, right? So here you see that example A, it takes three arguments, but we are passing only one argument. Why? Because it allows us to go with default values for these two parameters. So for B and C, this function example A, it allows us to go with default values. So if you do not pass them, it will go with default values, right? So that's why here for demonstration purpose, what I have done, I have passed example A with the value A only. So whatever the value that A will have, it will be assigned to this A, right? So let's say instead of 5, let's say make it 10. Okay? So A will have a value of 10. That value will be copied to this A, and then it will display A 10, B 5, C 2.5, right? So here you see that we have not passed in line number 12, we have not passed the values for B and C. So if we do not pass the value of B and C, so in the function call B and C, they will go with default values. Let's demonstrate this. You see that we have A is equal to 10, B is equal to 5, C is equal to 2.5. So B is 5, which is the default value. C is 2.5, which is the default value. So here, if we do not call the function with the arguments value, which have default values, so their default values will be used, right? Now let's see if we call, let's say we put B 15, and let's make it be And let's say we have C 7.5, right? And now we have another example, A call. And here, let's say we pass the value B and C, right? So now in this example, we have called example A with a value of A, which will be copied to this variable A. Then we have value of B, which is 10, which is 15. So now B will have 15 instead of 5, which was the default value. Same thing will be applied for C. Now C will have a value of 7.5 instead of 2.5, right? So now we can verify that. Excuse me. So let's run this program. Now you see that when we call example A with A equal to 10, B equal to 15, C equal to 7.5. So they are basically passed to A, B, and C of example A, and we can see their values, right? Now here is the thing. So here, if you look at this, A, B, and C, so A does not have any default value, right? So now let's say if we pass, we call the function example A without any parameter, so then we'll get an error, right? So you see that here, some error like highlighting, red highlighting here, it means that there is some error. Why? Because this function, there is one argument which doesn't have a default value, right? So example A is at least expecting the value for that argument, right? So if we do not pass that, so we'll get some error, right? So we can see that. Let's run this. You see that we have compilation error, right? So why compilation error? Because argument A or parameter A in example A, at least it expects a value, so which we are not supplying here, right? So here we have to remove this, right? So the idea here is that when you call a function and sometime you want to go with some default values for some parameters, so you can use this feature where you can assign default values to arguments, and you may not need, you may skip passing those arguments, and the function will take the default values for those arguments, okay?